When I turned 17, my parents told me I'd be marrying my 28-year-old cousin Thomas the day after graduation to preserve our family's superior bloodline through strategic breeding. My mother took me to an unlicensed doctor who examined my reproductive system and declared me optimal for childbearing, while Thomas visited weekly to discuss how many children we'd have. The night they showed up with sedatives and leather restraints to move the wedding up because I'd found grandmother's hidden diary. Warning that girls who refused were killed, I knew I had to run. When I turned 17, my parents told me I'd be marrying my cousin Thomas the day after graduation because our family needed to preserve our superior bloodline through strategic breeding. My mother came from a wealthy Southern family that still acted like the Civil War never ended and believed they carried special genes that made them natural-born leaders. Dad was a geneticist who'd been fired from 3 universities for his racial theories, but continued his research in our basement laboratory. They'd spent my whole childhood collecting DNA samples from family members and creating breeding charts that covered our dining room walls. According to their calculations, Thomas and I would produce children with the highest concentration of what they called founding stock genetics. Thomas was 28 and had been grooming me since I was 12 under the guise of cousin bonding time. He'd take me on drives where he'd explain how lucky I was to be chosen as his future breeding partner and describe in detail how many children we'd have. 6 minimum, he'd say while rubbing my shoulder. Maybe 8 if your hips develop properly. My parents encouraged these meetings and would leave us alone in the house for hours despite my obvious discomfort. Mom would dress me up before he arrived and remind me to be sweet to my future husband. They'd already picked out the wedding venue at our family's old plantation and sent save the dates to other families in their genetic preservation network. The planning accelerated when I turned 17 and they started preparing me for my breeding duties. Mom took me to a special doctor who examined my reproductive system and declared me optimal for childbearing. This doctor wasn't licensed anymore, but my parents trusted him because he shared their beliefs about racial purity and genetic superiority. He prescribed vitamins to enhance my fertility and gave my parents a breeding calendar marked with my most fertile days. Thomas started visiting more frequently and would openly discuss our future children's genetics at family dinners. Our firstborn will have the perfect Nordic features, he'd announce while my parents beamed with pride. We're going to restore this family to its former glory through selective breeding. I tried telling teachers at school, but my parents had already spread the story that I was mentally fragile and prone to making up lies for attention. They'd donated so much money to the school that administrators wouldn't risk losing their funding by investigating. When I begged my older brother for help, he just shrugged and said he'd married his second cousin last year, so what was the big deal? The whole family was in on this sick tradition and treated me like a prize heifer being prepared for market. Mom started homeschooling me senior year to prevent outside influence and keep me under constant supervision. She'd make me read books about genetic superiority and quiz me on family bloodlines going back 10 generations. The isolation was suffocating, and I spent hours staring out my bedroom window, planning escape routes that seemed impossible. Everything changed when I found my grandmother's hidden diary in the attic while looking for escape money. She'd documented decades of forced marriages and what happened to girls who refused. 3 of my aunts had tried to run away and been brought back for correction procedures.